Okay, today we're talking about the surety bond. We get so many questions out there about the surety bond. What is it? How it works? What is it going to cost me? So we're going to cover that information here in this video to give you a better understanding of what the surety bond is and how it works. So number one, the surety bond is required by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. It requires all freight brokers to have a $75,000 surety bond. Now, previously, prior to MAP 21, which is the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century bill, it was passed, and one of the requirements in that bill required that freight brokers move from a $10,000 bond to a $75,000 bond. And here was the reasoning behind that. What was happening is a small fraction of freight brokers were coming into the business, they were moving a lot of loads, and they weren't paying carriers. So this was having a tremendous effect on carriers and causing some issues and even running some carriers out of business because they weren't getting paid by freight brokers. So what they decided to do was to make it a harder entry for freight brokers to come into the business. And this would increase the bond from $10,000 to $75,000. Big increase, sevenfold increase. But they felt like it was necessary because it was starting to do some real damage to the trucking industry by running truckers out of business. And that is the backbone of this industry. The backbone of the trucking industry are carriers to move that equipment from point A to point B. So they couldn't continue to have these things happen. So they said, okay, well, we're gonna come in and change the surety bond from a $10,000 requirement to a $75,000 requirement. So all freight brokers and property brokers are required by the FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, to have a $75,000 surety bond. That's number one. So let's talk about what the surety bond is. The surety bond is like an insurance. For example, if you go out and get a car, you have to have insurance. You go out and get the insurance, and now you're driving your car along for the next 1 or 2 years and nothing happens. You've been paying your insurance. You said, okay, at the end of the year, 12 months have passed, nothing happens. You say, okay, now I want my money back since nothing happened. Well, it doesn't work that way. You just continue to pay your insurance and you're insured, and anytime something happens, you can call your insurance up and say, hey, I had an accident, here's my police report, and that insurance will come out and do an assessment and pay. Well, let's take a look at the surety bond. The surety bond is your insurance. You're paying into this insurance, and usually it's quarterly, semi-annually, or annually payment, and you're paying into that insurance. And if for some reason you don't pay your carrier can file a claim against your surety bond and get paid. If you don't do what you say you're gonna do in accordance with your agreements with your carrier or your shipper, either of those can file a claim against your bond, and your bond will pay the amount that it's supposed to pay based off of whatever took place. So this is a measure to ensure that freight brokers do what they're supposed to do in accordance with their agreements with motor carriers and shippers. Now, let's look at the cost of a surety bond. A surety bond usually is gonna cost, when you first get started, between $1,500 and $3,000 is what I've seen that cost to be. My first surety bond was $3 grand. Now, here's the thing. You can negotiate that price because remember, they want to sell you a surety bond. So if you have good credit, and it is definitely going to depend some on your credit when you first get your surety bond because you don't have business credit established, so it's going to depend some on your personal credit. So when they take a look at your personal credit, if you have decent or you have good credit, then they'll give you a bond based off of what your credit rating is. And that cost is going to be reflective of what your credit is. So when you're looking at bonds and you're saying, hey, I'm getting ready to go out and get a bond, make sure you do your homework and square up your credit first, because it'll have an impact on your bond rate. So make sure you square away your credit first. Now, with that said, $1,500 to $3,000 is usually what that price is. But let's just say you go out and you get a price at $2,500 and you know that you have good credit. You want to do your best job of getting that price to as low as you can get it. Because what surety bond providers also understand is that you have good credit, so someone is going to give you a surety bond. They could very well give you one for a lower price than the other company offers. So make sure you negotiate, because it's not like that price is written in stone and say, hey, you have to give this person a $3,000 price because they are a first-year business and they have X credit rating. You know, that's the price that they throw out, and is if, you know, you take that price, then that's the price you get. Kind of like me. When I first got started, I had great credit, but I didn't negotiate at all. I got a $3,000 price for my surety bond, and when I got that price, I just accepted it. You know, I thought that was the going rate, didn't know any better, so I just accepted it. And my surety bond was $750 a quarter. We have 4 quarters in a year, so you're paying $750 for each quarter, and that was $3,000 a year. Now my surety bond is $1,500. So as you progress in the business, you get more time in the business and your credit rating may get better, you've paid carriers for a little while now, then you reapply for your surety bond at the end of the year or at the end of the term of that surety bond, and you negotiate for a much better price. So that's why I went from $3,000 to $1,500. Now, let's take a look in the providers. There are a lot of different providers out there for surety bonds. So you want to make sure that you do your homework. Don't just rush in and jump to get a surety bond because you're in a rush. Get a surety bond after you've taken the time to do your homework. Look at several different providers and see what that cost is. How much is it going to cost you to get a surety bond? And then choose the most reputable surety bond provider and the one that provides you the best price. Because surety bonds is not about just saying, oh, okay, I'm gonna go and get a surety bond, you know, because this is a big name and it has a big price. I'm gonna jump on that surety bond because it's gonna be much more beneficial. Not necessarily. No carrier since I have been in business has ever asked me who my surety bond provider is. It seems as if they don't care much about who your surety bond provider is. So don't try and go out and get the most expensive surety bond thinking that you're gonna have, some different type of protections in there because you have an expensive surety bond. You're just paying more money for it. So take a look at your surety bond providers, do your homework, don't just go out and get any provider, get a reputable surety bond provider, and then negotiate the best price for you and your business. So that's what I wanted to share with you today about surety bond providers. Take your time, look around, do your homework on your providers, and choose the best provider for you and your company. So before we end this video, if you have had any experience with going out and doing some research on surety bond providers and you've gotten different prices from those providers, share it in the comments below so that everybody can benefit from it. That way they can see the surety bond provider that you use, you can see the ones that they use, you can start to look at prices, and we can figure out what's the best price, what the best provider is out there. And that way we make decisions in the light instead of in the dark. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. See you at the top because the bottom is much too crowded.